welcome to Stacktastic, the weekly web show for the avid comic book reader and those who aspire to become so. This week, my review of Avengers Assemble as Disney XD debuts its replacement for Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes in an attempt to better tie into their cinematic universe and compete with DC Nation, which, by the way, also struggles to balance corporate needs with those of the fans. Warning, this review does contain spoilers. Plus, as always, my recommendations for what comics to pick up or download this week. Let's get started. Does Avengers Assemble tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, considering that's its #1 goal? Yes and no. On the one hand, like Iron Man 3, it picks up where the Avengers left off, and it also utilizes the same lineup, with the addition of Sam Wilson, aka Falcon, and, unbelievably, MODOK. I've been concerned that Marvel's quirkier characters like MODOK and Rocket Raccoon might be a tough sell to mainstream audiences, and seeing one of them here in action doesn't make me feel any better. Although a villain who can telepathically manipulate tech is a clever adversary for Iron Man. Speaking of villains, I wasn't thrilled with the choices for this first episode, Red Skull and MODOK, as they just seem a bit too cartoony for the Avengers. Come to think of it, their whole scheme of body swapping was pretty cartoonish as well, and while I realize Avengers Assemble is a cartoon, viewers are clearly gravitating to more sophisticated content across the board these days. And clearly Tony Stark doesn't watch any cartoons, as he'd have been able to tell right away that Cap was teleported rather than killed, and that machine was clearly doing some sort of swap. All cartoon 101 scenarios, and one could even argue superhero 101 scenarios. Now, I don't watch any of Man of Action's other cartoons, so I can't tell if this is their standard style, but I personally found it lacking in comparison to other iconic animated shows like Batman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, Young Justice, and the Airbender series. Besides choice of villain, I really don't like how the Avengers were depicted. First of all, everyone was really mean to each other, and as I said, Tony Stark makes way too many rookie mistakes. Thor was turned into a walking Asgardian stereotype, and I would have liked to have seen more Bruce Banner instead of just the Hulk. This show needs more science bros. Hawkeye was the biggest jerk of them all, although it was interesting to see his role expanded, while Jeremy Renner has been complaining about the lack of character development in the movie. I couldn't believe it took about 10 minutes for Black Widow to even show up, and then I was disappointed that she was turned into the typical female superhero who doesn't make any mistakes and flaunts it in the guys' faces. Overcoming obstacles and being human makes for compelling characters, male and female. And of course, Cap was totally sidelined because he has the smallest fan base. Finally, there's Sam Wilson, who I couldn't believe Tony Stark suggested don the War Machine armor. Seriously, nobody associated with this show realized that comes across as racist? I appreciated Sam's enthusiasm, and as we've all predicted, he's another S.H.I.E.L.D. grad. But if Hawkeye can get a costume redesign, why can't Falcon? And we know he will in the movie, so what's with the 80s look here, complete with 80s sound effects? To be perfectly honest, Falcon looks like he should be fighting to free Bright Moon. Did I like anything about the show? I did like the animation, and I think it had a lot of good action. Not just the scenarios, but the way the fights were animated and the camera movement. I also liked seeing Black Widow expand her arsenal a little beyond her gauntlets, which, come to think of it, she didn't use at all. I think if Avengers Assemble slows down a little, both in terms of story pacing and quips, and adds a more personal B storyline to go along with all the action, this show does have potential. But all this first episode really did was make me miss the movie, the actors who make these characters so likable, and the deft direction of Joss Whedon. Sure, these characters existed long before all of that, but if Avengers Assemble is going to draw on the movie so heavily, that means it also has to live up to it. Right now, though, what Marvel and Disney XD have is a sophisticated animated show that switched brains with a typical kiddie Saturday morning cartoon. What do you think? Be sure to share your own thoughts about Avengers Assemble down below. So while animation from both Marvel and DC clearly has some kinks to work out, thankfully we still have a steady stream of comics to tide us over. This week from DC, to help get you in the mood for Man of Steel, you can pick up Adventures of Superman #1, where some digital short stories written by top talent see print for the first time. What makes this a must-read for me is a story about Superman and Lex Luthor from two of my favorite creators, Red She-Hulk's Jeff Parker and Daredevil's Chris Samnee. Speaking of creators, one of the hottest names in comics right now is Scott Snyder, and this week he debuts new series Wake under DC's Vertigo imprint. He's reteaming with artist Sean Murphy from his stellar American Vampire Survival of the Fittest mini for this new underwater sci-fi thriller. Then over at Marvel, we've got another all-star creative team coming together for X-Men #1, Brian Wood and Olivier Coipel. As I've often said, the X-Men have the strongest female characters in all of comics, and now they're finally getting their own book. Another team that had some great female characters was Runaways, and co-creator Adrian Alfona is the guest artist this month on Uncanny X-Force #5. His work is not to be missed, even if this new series is proving to be somewhat underwhelming. Plus, Clive Barker is debuting a new title over at Boom Studios, Next Testament. A CEO is looking for redemption and teams up with a mysterious man who says he's God. Will they do a lot of good or damage? Finally, a huge thanks to everyone who stopped by the Boom Studios booth at Phoenix Comic-Con this past weekend. Just like at Calgary, you guys are responsible for the first Superbia trade selling out. I've always heard a lot of nice things about Phoenix Comic-Con, and I'm now happy to report firsthand that every single nice word is true. And that's this week's Stacktastic. I'm Grace Randolph for Think About the Ink. Hope to see you back on Friday for Between the Pages. Until then, happy reading.